Now, in our last hour, we just finished dealing with the fact that first-degree murder is common law murder under aggravated circumstances. We looked to see what constitutes common law murder, and common law murder is homicide with malice without excuse, justification, or mitigation. We've gone through that. We understand what constitutes homicide, the four ways to find malice. Over here, we understand excuse, justification, and mitigation. We now want to look at now that we know what constitutes common law murder, we want to know what are the aggravating circumstances that will raise what was common law murder up to first-degree murder. So let's make a list of those. The first-degree murder, as we've already represented, is common law murder under aggravating circumstances. So what are the aggravating circumstances? And that will make common law murder elevated to first-degree murder. And those circumstances are, number one, premeditation, premeditated, deliberate, and willful. Second one, lying in wait. Poison. Now, I realize poison is just another form of premeditation, but it has happened so much that it's kind of got its own place here. Poison, bomb, torture, there's one case on the bar exam where two people were robbing a pharmacy, and the one had pistol whipped the pharmacy person to get the drugs from the pharmacy, and the other person looked at the person who had been pistol whipped and said, well, he's not dead, and he threw them over the cliff where he died from the fall over the cliff. And you could claim that that's torture. The felony murder rule will get you first-degree murder. We talked about that a minute ago earlier. Killing of a child during certain sex acts will get you first-degree murder. Killing of a what I call P-cubed, and the P-cubed are police in the line of duty, prison guards in the line of duty, and politicians. And if you kill a politician in order to prevent that person from carrying out their political agenda. Now, so these are the circumstances that will get you first degree. And now, second-degree murder is all common law murder which is not first degree. In other words, if you have common law murder and you don't have the facts to elevate it to first-degree murder, then what you have left is second-degree murder. So really, common law murder is second-degree murder, and you often see them kind of used interchangeably. But it's more the labeling. When we took common law murder and broke it up into these two categories, first and second, that the second really is just the common law murder that you couldn't elevate to first. Next comes capital murder. Capital murder is first-degree murder plus special circumstances. And what are the special circumstances that will elevate first-degree murder to capital murder, where people get executed? And the answer is, first of all, multiple multiple first degree murders will get capital. Secondly, the killing of a killing for economic gain. Now, this economic gain that we're talking about here is not killing the liquor store owner to get the money out of the cash register. We're talking about white collar type economic gain, like killing your joint tenant in order to take over the ownership of Blackacre, killing the insured person in order to get the insurance money, killing the testator in order to get the money from the will sooner, that kind of stuff, killing your law partner to take over the law firm. And that kind of economic gain will get you first degree, will get you special circumstances. The killing of the child during certain sex acts will get you first degree. Now, please understand that the mere fact that you used the fact that it was the killing of a child to get you first degree doesn't prevent you from using that same fact to get from first degree to capital murder. And that's what we have here. P cubed, same thing. Those are the most common ones. Now, so that's first degree. Now let's take a look at our examples. First of all, the example of the grocery store clerk was kind of crazy, and the grocery store clerk will that will not be first degree because you might have common law murder, maybe, but if you do have common law murder, you don't have any of these circumstances that will lead you to first degree. And so we don't have first degree murder, we can't get to capital. Secondly, in the case of the convenience store that Don and Art robbed, and then the Vince from the convenience store came out and shot and killed Art, and then Don killed Vince. Well, that was felony murder because the killing occurred during and because of the robbery, and therefore felony murder, that will get you first degree. Most times these statutes, if you look at them in the jurisdictions, they don't make you do a two-step process. They just come out and say, felony murder is first degree murder. And they tell you which felonies they apply in that jurisdiction. In our third example, where Don finally found Vic, who had assaulted his wife 3 months earlier, do we have first degree? Well, you might have premeditation. It took him 3 months to find this guy. It took him 3 months to find the guy, and then when he found him, he took a gun with him. You obviously can make a case for first degree, and you should do so. And you got to, spell it out, make the argument that the prosecutor would make that this is first degree murder. Don't just say one sentence about it. So that brings us to here, and our final category is non-involuntary manslaughter. So involuntary manslaughter, how do you get to involuntary manslaughter? And the answer is that there are several ways to get to involuntary manslaughter. One is vehicular manslaughter. Vehicular manslaughter, and you can see how in vehicular manslaughters, people did not intend to kill anybody. Now, if somebody intended to kill someone, you can't get to involuntary manslaughter with an intentional killing. Okay? You can only get there if there really was no intent to kill. And a vehicular manslaughter, usually there is no intent to kill. Now, please pay attention that if the vehicular manslaughter happened because the driver was extremely drunk, okay, not just a little bit over the limit, but so drunk that you can say that this person acted with wantonness here, that their conduct amounted to wanton conduct. If the alcohol limit is 0.08 like it is in California, and somebody had a blood alcohol of 0.3, well, that's like 2.5 times over the limit, and 3.5 times over the limit. And so that you can argue that that to drive under those circumstances is wanton conduct. On the other hand, if the alcohol limit is 0.08 and the person is 0.12 or something, you're never going to get a jury to believe that that was wanton conduct and utter disregard and so forth. And so to get second-degree murder out of vehicular manslaughter, you need a very high alcohol blood level, and somebody got killed because of it. So vehicular manslaughter is one way to get involuntary manslaughter. Another way to get involuntary manslaughter is criminal negligence. Now, criminal negligence really occurs in situations where, for example, people are out hunting, and these people are out hunting and the bush moves, and they think that the animal they're hunting is behind the bush, and somebody shoots behind the bush, shoots at the bush, and turns out to be some person back there who gets killed because of that. Well, this person who shot the gun at the moving bush did not intend to kill anybody. So you don't have the intent to kill. They did not intend to inflict great bodily harm. Now, were they acting wantonly? Well, not quite, see, because wanton means that the person acted in utter disregard. I don't care if somebody gets killed or not. When you shoot into a moving passenger train, the person is saying, I don't care. But when you shoot at what you think is an animal behind the moving bush, the shooter isn't saying, I don't care if anyone gets killed. So you cannot meet the wantonness standards. So far, the person who shot at the moving bush, we do not have intent to kill. We do not have intent to inflict great bodily harm. We do not have wantonness. We certainly don't have felony murder rule. And so criminal negligence is something, what that person who shot the gun has done is committed criminal negligence. Because that is so negligent to shoot at something you don't know what it is, that is criminal negligence or gross negligence, something of that sort. But it's again, you don't have the malice that you require for second-degree murder. So you end up with involuntary manslaughter. Another way to get to involuntary manslaughter is the so-called misdemeanor manslaughter rule. Now, the misdemeanor manslaughter rule is saying that if you commit a misdemeanor and it's in one of the inherently like the common law misdemeanors are called they're wrongs that are just kind of like social wrongs, assault, battery, theft, that sort of stuff, with no intent to kill. But if you commit one of these inherently malum in se misdemeanors, like assault, battery, theft, and so forth, and somebody gets killed because of these malum in se misdemeanors, okay, then you can get involuntary manslaughter. A typical example, two people engaged in a simple street brawl in cowboy country, and one cowboy hits the other one, the person falls, hits their head. No intent to inflict great bodily harm, just a simple fight. The people might have even been relatives, you know, what cowboy country is like. I'm not insulting people in cowboy country, but I'm just trying to make the image of two people who are fighting and did not mean to do anything except to fight, and just a simple fist fight. And the person falls and dies. Well, there's your misdemeanor, you know, the simple fight, and somebody died, involuntary manslaughter. These are the typical ways to get your involuntary manslaughter. Remember, on the bar exam, what you want to watch for is if there was really no intent to kill, and there was no intent to inflict great bodily harm, and the person was not consciously involved in wanton, reckless conduct saying, I don't care if somebody gets killed. Now, if I'm having a fist fight with somebody, and the person is kind of a friend of mine, and we're just having a simple fist fight, and the person, I hit the person, there's no intent to kill anybody. There's no intent to inflict great bodily harm. Okay, so you don't have wanton conduct, because in this fist fight, the person isn't saying, I don't care if they get killed. Okay, so you don't have any of this stuff, and you don't have the malice. And when you don't have the malice, you might be able to find involuntary manslaughter. Please keep in mind, if you do have malice, you cannot have involuntary manslaughter. If you don't have malice, you might have involuntary manslaughter. So that is the law of homicide. The law of homicide is about murder. We know what it takes to find common law murder, and common law murder plus aggravated circumstances will get you first degree. We understand what it takes to get first degree murder. You need the aggravated circumstances in addition to the common law murder. We know what the aggravated circumstances are: premeditation, lying in wait, poison, bomb, torture, felony murder, rule, child, P cubed. And each jurisdiction has its own list of what circumstances may elevate to first degree. Everybody agrees on premeditation, and most people will agree on the P cubed. But the rest of them are kind of from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Poison is a form of premeditation, of course. But so this is statutory, what aggravating circumstance. But for bar purposes, use a list like I have here. So we know how to get first degree murder by finding one of these aggravating circumstances. We found it in the case of Don, who went out looking for the person who had assaulted his wife, and I think you have an argument for premeditation in that case. You do not have an argument for premeditation in the case of the felony murder rule. Now, you have something you can mention on the bar exam that may be worth points to you. For example, if on the bar exam, in the case where Don shot Vince, the convenience store person, you can argue that, well, it only takes an instant to premeditate. You don't have to spend days doing it. And maybe the person thought about it and decided, yes, I want to kill this person. They thought about it, deliberated, and then did it. But you can see the timing was so short there that, and again, it doesn't take forever to do it, but it seems much more likely that the person really was just shooting Vince because Vince had shot Art and Vince was going to shoot him next. And of course, again, this person, Don, might claim a privilege saying, I shot Vince because Vince was going to shoot me next. And so it was self-defense. But this person who is robbing the store does not have the privilege of self-defense, so that won't work. So that's how we deal with those issues. If you have second-degree murder, which is all common law murder, which is not first degree, if you have second-degree murder, that's the same as common law murder. If you have first-degree murder, you can raise it to capital if you find special circumstances. And finally, if there's no malice, you can seek involuntary manslaughter. And with that in mind, then, the only thing we really need to do next is to look at some examples and work through the examples. Now, let's begin with the case where we have the crazy person at the grocery store. They're not necessarily crazy, but a certainly mentally ill person working at the grocery store. And this person has been charged with first-degree murder. Well, let's see. If this person is charged with first-degree murder, to find first-degree murder, we have to find common law murder with aggravating circumstances. Can you find common law murder against the crazy clerk at the grocery store? Well, let's see. Do we have common law murder rule is homicide with malice without excuse, justification, or mitigation. You have the homicide, obviously. Do you have the malice? And you don't have intent to kill, because pushing the person in the grocery store would not show intent to kill or intent to inflict great bodily harm. Does it show wantonness? And I doubt that. I don't think pushing that person, that the clerk at the grocery store saying, I don't care whether you die or not, I'm going to push you. I don't think you have wantonness, and you certainly don't have the felony murder rule. So you cannot find malice against that grocery store clerk. And since you cannot find malice, then the next thing you want to look for is involuntary manslaughter. And you have involuntary manslaughter. You have a misdemeanor manslaughter rule, because pushing that person was a simple assault. It's a malum in se misdemeanor. So you could get involuntary manslaughter against the clerk. Now, the clerk will also argue that even for involuntary manslaughter, that I have a defense of insanity, because the insanity, of course, would prevent any kind of conviction. Does this person have the defense of insanity. And we see that insanity is one of the excuses here on this side. The excuses and the McNaughton rule, where the person has to not know what they're doing or know that it's wrong. This person knew what he was doing when he pushed the person, says, I'll kill you. So McNaughton rule won't get him off on insanity. Irresistible impulse, maybe, but it depends on how irresistible the impulse has to be, and that's a fuzzy area. But he may be able to show that his earlier incarcerations for mental disease were partly because of irresistible impulse. Durham says the conduct has to be the product of a mental disease or defect, and again, the previous institutionalizations would be used to decide whether or not the nature of this person's disease is such that he does this to people. And finally, the Model Penal Code. Once again, the standards of the Model Penal Code are really softened standards of McNaughton and irresistible impulse kind of combined. They're combined in the following way. The Model Penal Code says, if as a result of a mental disease or defect, the person is unable to appreciate the wrongfulness of their conduct, unable to appreciate rather than did not know it was wrong. I mean, did not know it was wrong is very crazy, but unable to appreciate it is a little softer. And or if the person is unable to appreciate what they were doing. Now that's not happening here because Don at the grocery store realized he was pushing the person. So unable to appreciate what they're doing, or lacks substantial capacity to control their conduct. Not irresistible impulse, but lacks substantial capacity to control their conduct. And so you can see how that's a softer version of the irresistible impulse. And we have decided that this person might be able to qualify under that insanity and under the Model Penal Code. So our guy Don at the grocery store might qualify for that. There's no justifications for what Don did. There's no public authority and no privileges. And Don might claim that at the very best, I should be convicted at worst of voluntary manslaughter based on heat of passion. But I don't think the heat of passion will work because objectively a person would not become that incensed over this little dispute about whether or not the defendant was blocking the aisle. So voluntary manslaughter, he will not be able to do that. Will not be able. And furthermore, let me back up for a second. You actually don't even get to the issue of mitigation, because you only get to the issue of mitigation if you can find the malice. If there's malice, you're going to get second-degree murder unless you got one of these total offenses. If there's no malice, if there is malice, you may be able to get down to, maybe mitigate it down. If there is no malice, you don't even get to this issue. And Don's position is that there was no malice. I did not intend to kill, intend to inflict great bodily harm. I was not acting wantonly, and there's no felony murder. So you, in principle, you don't even get to this. Our second example is the example of the robbery of the convenience store. And in the robbery of the convenience store, let's take a look at that one. That is our felony murder case. In felony murder, the killing, obviously Don killed Vince, so you have the homicide. Felony murder, at common law, if anyone is killed during and because of the crime, certain events was killed during and because of the crime. Red line saying that felony murder does not apply if it was a co-felon. If it was a co-felon who was killed by justifiable homicide. The California view says that the felons themselves have to do the killing, not a case where the cops are giving chase and the cops crash into somebody and kill someone. The felons themselves did not do that killing, and we don't have that problem here. And finally, the Model Penal Code, which has abolished the concept of felony murder rule altogether. So in the case of the convenience store, we have common law felony murder, and red line is an exception, and the exception does not apply because it was not a co-felon who was killed. So since we do not have the exception, we go to the common law rule, which gives us felony murder against Don when Don killed Vince at the convenience store. Then our final analysis here, final example, Vic assaulted Don's, Don killed Vic, and we know what the analysis there. Don killed Vic after Don caught up with Vic for assaulting his wife 3 months earlier. Don killed Vic, the homicide part. What kind of crime do we have against Don for the killing of Vic? Probably first, you have to find common law murder and then try to find the aggravating circumstances. If you find common law murder against Don, you've already got second degree, then you try to raise it to first degree. Do we have common law murder against Don for the killing of Vic 3 months after he assaulted his wife? The homicide is given to us. Well, the homicide is given. He shot him in the head. But then the proximate cause issue comes up saying the doctors didn't do it. Don did it. Because what the doctors did was pull the plug after the person was obviously brain dead. And that was a foreseeable intervening event which did not change the outcome. Furthermore, when the person came to the hospital, they were already pronounced brain dead. So under either of those reasons, you have Don, you satisfied the homicide component, Don killed Vic. Malice, well, Don shot him in the head, and so you got intent to kill. And now the Don over here has no excuse. Don is not insane or a child. Don has no justification. And Don will claim mitigation, heat of passion, and his heat of passion argument will not be based on the claim that I came and found this person assaulting my wife, and because this is 3 months later. He will claim that there was a separate and independent heat of passion argument happened when he found the guy, and as a result of that heat of passion, he shot him. And now you go through the analysis of was the event provocative enough so that a reasonable person would have acted out of blind passion, and that Don himself did in fact do that. And you're going to have a lot of problems with this provocation because you don't have any details, and also with the time. So this is where Don's argument is that I was provoked and I did not have time to cool, and you will have to argue what you don't have many facts, but argue the facts you have and decide whether or not you're going to give him that heat of passion. And that is the analysis of these 3 questions, and that completes our presentation of the law of homicide and some examples as to how you would deal with that. These examples are all former bar questions, and so they are realistic in terms of what you should expect on the bar. And that is the end of this lecture.